I find it amazing just how much like coming home it is when I look at Planetside 2 again. As I've said before, this channel started with Planetside 2 videos back in the day, so revisiting the game now is part nostalgia, but also trying to look from an impartial perspective over how a new player might see this game in 2020. Just what does a game that's coming up on its 8th birthday actually offer for players today? Familiarity and nostalgia only lasts for so long and obviously doesn't affect everyone. Well, if the pace of development is any indication, then things certainly have seemed in ruder health than perhaps at any time since the game's launch. Large-scale additions to the game have been pushed out. We touched on escalation before, but since then there's also been a Colossus update, adding a massive tank as a natural foil to the floating Bastion carrier that dominates the skies over the battlefield. However, the recent and still free Shattered Warpgate update is perhaps the most ambitious yet. Not just a huge change to the existing continent map of Esamir, but also adding in, for the first time to Planetside 2, narrative, story-style campaign for players to complete. So with all that said, let's actually ask, Planetside 2, is it worth playing, especially in 2020? The new campaign, rooting from the dramatic changes to Esamir, that is the destruction of the Northern Warpgate, is perhaps the most intriguing addition to the game in a long time. We've almost become used to large content pieces like flying carriers being added to the game since Rogue Planet games took over development. But the addition of effectively single-player, or more actually, solo experiences in a multiplayer world has just never happened before in Planetside 2. It plays not dissimilarly to WoW questing actually. Activate part of the campaign, run to a waypoint, talk to the person, they'll give you another part to follow, and so on. There's text explaining what's happening, but again, a bit like WoW, the only voice-acted part is an opening phrase you get from interacting with the NPC. The actual story is text. I have to say, I didn't think I was that into the whole idea of the campaign when I actually came into this, but once I started to experience it, it kind of won me over actually. I liked the idea of having a mission to complete whilst all this other stuff was happening around me in, the rest of the game. Yes, I did die a bit when those locations were in enemy hands. It didn't feel too bad, though I could probably imagine people griefing those specific campaign mission spots actually in the map. I'm not going to detail every part of it and spoil it for everyone, but there's a bunch of kind of fetch questy style missions. Find a bunch of that, take that over to here, but also surprisingly there's more interactive style missions than I imagined. And I'm sure this isn't or wasn't to the tastes of everyone. Those MMO style missions aren't normally part of the Planetside 2 gameplay loop, so people who inherently dislike them may not like that direction. For me, as a Tier 0 implementation of a brand new system and a first development team go at something brand new, I actually enjoyed my time and came away more impressed than I thought I might be. Not just on the campaign side, but also the huge amounts of work that had clearly gone into changing the Esamir map, adding large visual effects and even a roaming storm. We've really not seen the like of that before in Planetside 2. And just quick aside to say, if you are enjoying this video, please do tap the thumb up button. It helps me out with YouTube and discoverability and all stuff like that. If you tap that subscribe button as well, I really appreciate that too. Thank you so much. I am not saying the campaign is perfect, not at all. I think there's some pacing issues with the campaign for sure. The gating between the missions can be a bit confusing. Even some of the language used in the reward unlocks I found confusing as well. There's a bunch of user experience things to learn and fold into that next part of the campaign, plus other improvements like diversity of the things you actually do in those campaign missions. Perhaps even have the text voice acted, and I know that's a massive long shot. The cost would probably be pretty prohibitive. But as a first step into this kind of genre for Planetside 2, it felt positive. Of more impact for me was the issue I had of actually getting access to this new content. I have characters on 3 main servers. They span EU, NA East, and NA West. Over a period of days, when I first wanted to actually check out this new Shattered Warpgate expansion, at the time I was playing, Esamir simply wasn't open on any of those servers. So I have to imagine someone, perhaps they're new to the game, perhaps who wants to experience that new content, perhaps they'll even subscribe to that All Access Pass, and then not be immediately able to go into the game and experience something that they've actually paid for. And I know this is the nature of the game, the ever closing and opening play zones, but now there's a real specific reason to go to that continent of Esamir. It feels like the older core gameplay elements are fighting with that newer, differing content. I also understand that the actual pacing of the campaign is meant to be pretty relaxed, each lasting a month, with the whole thing lasting 3 months, but not being really able to see the new content when I was ready to play the game didn't feel like a great opening to this new chapter. I can also imagine that a lot of the work for this update was going into making systems for these missions that simply didn't exist in the game before, perhaps even interacting with other game systems that were never intended to be used in this way. I'm not minimizing the huge amount of work that I'm guessing that it really was. In the end, on the third day of trying, I found one of my characters on Emerald had Esamir open, but for what it's worth, my Connery character has never had Esamir open any time I've checked. I should also point out that you don't need to pay to access this new content. You can spend your certs to unlock the campaign. The pricing scales with your battle rank, so if you're an old hand and big-time infantry farmer, then even the significantly higher price tag probably won't hurt too much. And it does feel like the devs certainly wanted something of a cert sync for longer-term players. Keep in mind though that this is a cost per month over 3 months for the whole campaign story. In order to keep playing for free, I'm thinking that's quite a lot of farming that you have to do pretty regularly. As far as I know, there's no alternative to becoming a member or using certs to unlock. There's no direct payment option, which I felt was kind of missing. For newer players, however, the balance feels a little bit more different. I'm conscious that low battle rank players will be picking between unlocking weapons, attachments, and loadout elements versus unlocking the new campaign content. As such, I'd like to see that campaign be as close to free inserts or a nominal fee as possible really. A choice to see that new content shouldn't stunt their progress in more fundamental areas of the game. There's a new daily mission system as well. You pick 3 missions to be completed over the next 12 hours. I only really interacted with this a couple of times. The rewards seemed a little narrow, and the missions themselves perhaps a little underwhelming. There was stuff I didn't want to do, but then I have to be mindful that perhaps that's because I've played so much before that I kind of already know my preferences. For newer players, I can imagine it being a motivator to try out other parts of the game. Perhaps you only normally play light assault, so seeing these missions and the rewards makes you check out medic or engineer or whatever. I could see this new system being iterated upon and tweaked. The whole idea seems pretty positive, and I hope with some tuning that it can be enthusing for new and old players alike. Just wanted to also say that of note, there's a Halloween event, like is normal for Planetside 2 at this time of year, but this is the first year that we've had the player hub, Sanctuary. Happy to say that there's been a really nice decorative pass done, pumpkins everywhere, spooky noises, floating candles, fog on the ground, the whole works. That's sort of non-essential content for the game, but having it totally sells you on how much the devs want to use this social zone to tie the world together and show the updates. It's actually really nice to see. The core gameplay of Planetside 2 hasn't taken a backseat though. I still come back after playing newer titles with newer graphics and find myself impressed and surprised by how unique an experience Planetside 2 still provides. With the new destroyed area around where the northern Warpgate used to be, I'm fighting up slopes, reviving teammates. Yes, I still mainly play medic, but now it's on hills and scarred landscapes that I've never seen before. The combined arms side is fully there too. In squad, Hell Let Loose or Postscriptum, you might have occasional tanks, limited in number, on each side. Whereas in Planetside 2, there's nothing to stop the platoon leader asking 20 people under their command to all spawn a vehicle and charge a base. It's that sort of gameplay and scale that sets Planetside 2 out from almost every other title, and frankly, what must also make it hugely challenging to try and constantly balance. If you're a new player, you might also be worrying about customization, but not just loadout or weapons, but also cosmetic. Broadly speaking, there are some minor cosmetic unlocks for free, some will require a fair bit of grinding, but most are paid. And if you are a free-to-play player, please do remember that if you're enjoying the game and spending money on buying currency to unlock cool helmets and armor and camo and vehicle attachments and so on, is a great way to support Planetside 2's development. Then also you unlock the real endgame, which is of course fashion. Performance has certainly been a lot better since moving to DirectX 11 a while back now, the game originally launching on DirectX 9 of course. I'd expect in less populated areas you'll see 3-figure frame rates on newer systems. However, a bit like how recently I talked about squads game modes focusing players into one small map area and how that seemed to impact performance, well, with Planetside 2, the sandbox nature means that sometimes there can be hundreds of players in one location, and on an old machine like this, the performance, well, it takes a hit. It would be great if it didn't, but, so much extra work for the computer to do with that many players, overhead for network traffic and syncing animations and so on. It doesn't spoil the experience though. In fact, it makes me marvel that such a game exists at all. When all that mayhem is going on around you, just stop and look for a second, because few games create experiences like Planetside 2 does. Player numbers visible on Steam have been pretty stable above sort of peak players of around 2,500 per day, and then when the Shattered Warpgate releases, that spikes by about 50%. It was a bunch lower at the start of the year, but since the buzz about actively developing Planetside 2 again started in pretty much, I guess, February of this year, the player base hasn't dipped that low again. I should also point out that this is only the player base on Steam. You can run the game separately via the Daybright launcher, as I would imagine a bunch of veterans do, so their numbers aren't counted in this Steam graph. There used to be a site that looked at the Planetside 2 API to see player server numbers, but that doesn't seem to be working at the moment, so Steam numbers are the best source I have at the moment. So, Planetside 2, is it worth playing? If you are a returning player who wants something new added into the mix, has some certs or money to spend unlocking a campaign that adds a bit of spice into those who like the lore side, or just perhaps something a little bit out of the ordinary for players who aren't, massive lore people, then I'd say it's worth trying out. Keep in mind that this is the first time anything like this has been added to the game, and as I said, think of this as a tier 0, and with hopefully many more improvements and refinements coming in the future. If you just want to go pew pew and shoot some mans, then Planetside 2 still has that in spades. The new northern Esamir area is fresh feeling and outside the normal lattices of bases. So pretty much anyone doing campaign stuff, or those who just want a massive battle, can go up there and fight whenever they want. If you've not played in a while, then you'll notice base changes, floating bastion carriers that dominate huge areas and serve as focal points for airfights, not to mention new weapons, cosmetics and so on. For new and old players, Planetside 2 has not lost the magic it had at launch. It's not the same game. People may have rose-tinted spectacles over particular times during the game's history, as often happens, but know that that feeling of scale and spectacle survived those 8 years since its first launch. Like almost all of these combined arms games, it's best experienced with others, so join an open squad with good people leading them, and you can truly feel how scale and organization can themselves act as a force multiplier even before you start thinking about vehicles. If you are new to this world, or an old hand who took a break, yet again, with this update, there's no better time to get yourself strapped into a drop pod and get your boots back on Araxis. Have you played before? Are you new? What do you think of Planetside 2 and all these new additions? Leave me a comment below right now with your powerful thoughts and feelings. As always, I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this video, please do tap the thumb up button and the subscribe button. They help me grow the channel and continue to make videos just like this one. If you post the video to Reddit or Facebook or Twitter or wherever, then an extra special thank you. That really does help me out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.